This is so cool to be here. I'm so excited to talk with you all. I actually just want to say, what an amazing conference. Can we all give it up for the JFrog folks? They've been working so hard, and you can tell the details have been planned meticulously. It's been all thought through. And so a friend of mine told me the other day, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And this conference has been giving me a lot of confidence in what JFrog is shipping. So, I mean, we even had a gala, right? That gala was amazing. We had rock stars at that gala and some dueling pianos. And that was fun. I want to tell you a quick story before we jump into the talk about the gala, which happened last night. You all met Devin last night, right? And last night when I was at the gala, I synced up with Devin and I said, hey, my talk, I've got like 20 minutes, 23 minutes. If you really want me to get it down to that 15, then I can do it. She was like, 15? I said 50. And I was like, 50? What am I gonna do? And my literal stomach dropped. I'm sitting there thinking, the talk's 50 minutes? Okay. Well, so I start furiously texting a friend, and I'm saying, dude, it's 50 minutes, not 15. And he's like, just talk slow. And so, if you are watching this in the future on YouTube, you can watch it at 2x. Where's the camera? I'm making sure you know that. But really, then I'm sitting there, I'm like, what am I gonna do? And he told me, he reminded me, man, I literally watched you entertain people when there was technical difficulties at your last virtual conference you did in front of like 5,000 people with nothing but a guitar. And I think you'll be fine. In that moment, I realized I'm the dueling piano of keynotes. All right, so let's get into this. I promise we're gonna get into this, right? In like 20 minutes after I kill more time. No, seriously, this has been awesome. It seems like the killing time is over. I only get allotted that much. I wanna talk to you about the agentification of software and why I think this is so important. And also, why I feel like there is a UX problem that is standing in front of us if we want to get to some utopian world of what that means. Before we get into that, let me introduce myself a little. I started the MLOps community in 2020. There was like 5 of us in a Slack. And really, we've grown to be a global community of over 100,000 developers. And we're focused on bringing AI and machine learning into production. That's our sweet spot. We really want to help get that education out there because, as you all know, it's probably not the easiest thing to do, right? And so that's why I love events like this that are helping move the ball forward on productionizing this cool software that we have. And we do this by in-person events that happen around the globe, whether it's meetups or it's workshops or even conferences. I was literally in Devin's position last week with our own little mini conference. So I know what it's like to get the slides from speakers, and I also know how much of a pain in the butt I was being, so thank you, Devin, wherever you are. We have virtual events, like I mentioned. We've got one-on-one curated matching, so if you're looking to do something special in this field, and maybe you're working on a computer vision problem and you're trying to figure that out, maybe you're working with agents, you can let us know, and we can tell you who else in the community of 100,000 people are also doing that. So, and then a little side note, I wildly like to get into ice baths in the winter because I live in Germany and it gets cold. But let's clarify some terms, right? When we get into this talk of the agentification of software, what does that actually mean? What is that? And what I want to say when I say this term is this utopian idea of being able to type in what we want or being able to express something to an agent, express the outcome we want, express our intent, and the agent or the AI can go and it can do that. We interact with machines right now, and anyone who has spent 10 minutes vibe coding, you probably have had the same thought that I had, which is, wait a minute, why isn't every interaction with any piece of software like this? Why can't I just express my intent and then it goes and does it, right? And when you click around in a GUI for like 20 minutes trying to find that one thing, you realize this should be easier. And that's what I mean by the agentification of software. I want to give the agent the outcome and then it does the rest. It can take over. This is a utopian scenario, and you can even think about it like, I want to say, go get me 100 leads, and you have a $1,000 budget. And then it goes and does that high of level, right? But I'm going to tell you a few reasons why I feel like there is a large disconnect between that user experience and where we are right now. And hopefully, you all are the builders of tomorrow, right? I can inspire you to take this back to your teams and start the conversations around it and see where we're at, what we're thinking about when it comes to some of these UX challenges. So, the first thing that we've all felt, we've all had this experience where you go into a chatbot and it says, ask me anything. And you're like, anything? Really? All right, let's try it. And what you see is that some of the stuff is all right. Then you ask it something about what you know, like what you're an expert on. And then it's like, this wasn't that good. It reminds me of a tweet I saw of a guy who said, yeah, so I had deep research go and compile me a report on something that I'm an expert in, and it wasn't good at all. So now I only use deep research to compile reports for things I know nothing about. What we have here is we're over-promising and we're under-delivering, right? And that's the first issue. In the UX, we're saying that we can ask anything, and then when you ask anything, it doesn't really add up. Next up is that we are putting so much cognitive load onto the user. When you have to interact with chat, you have to suck out what you have in your mind, formulate it so it's understandable, and then type it into a chat box. And that is not how we're used to interacting with machines. We're adding a lot of friction there. And that friction is always, any point you interject friction is a point where you can see drop-off, right? I like to think of it as like the way that we interact normally with machines right now when we go on the internet, we go onto social media, or we go to Netflix or whatever, we're being fed. But now you're asking me to be the chef, and I gotta chop up the vegetables and then serve them in a 5-course meal, right? That's the difference, that I'm being fed and I'm used to using these native touches like double tap or scroll or swipe. But now, I've got to go and I've got to think real hard about what I want, what the outcome is, and then I got to inject that into a little text box. And the second thing is that we don't know, or the third thing I should say, sorry, we don't know if we're the problem or if the agent capabilities are the problem. There's no feedback. So you've all probably had this experience where you drop in, you ask the agent to do something, and then it doesn't do it. And you're like, did it not do it because I didn't know my prompt magic good enough? Do I need to like tweak a few words? Do I need to buy another course on prompting? What do I gotta do to get this agent to execute? And so you don't see, like, the agent doesn't come back and say, you know what, actually, I got stuck at this last step. Maybe you can help me along. The agent just comes back and either says, no, I couldn't do that, or it just doesn't say anything and it gets stuck hanging, right? So we don't know. Are we the problem, or are the agent capabilities the problem? And that creates misaligned expectations. Again, we're over-promising and we're under-delivering. But let me remind you, this is like the coolest thing to happen to software since sliced bread, right? This is awesome, and there are some really incredible capabilities. But we were promised something different. And so what is it going to take to bridge that gap? Well, there's a few other pieces that I wanted to point out that might be one of the inherent reasons why this is so hard of a nut to crack. And that is the limitations of text. If we are just relying on text, that medium is not the best for how we humans like to express intent. There are certain things that we do when we communicate that are not caught in just texting, right? If we're restricted to text, it's like we're playing with one hand tied behind our back. Actually, if you think about it, anyone who codes for a living, you know that your majority of your job, it's not spent coding, right? What is it spent doing? It's probably spent aligning. And you align so much, like I don't need to tell you about this, right? You're professional aligners. Even we've created memes about this because you align so much, right? But in these alignment meetings, what do? We want to interact with people. We want to mind meld with someone. We want high bandwidth communication. And right now with text, it's low bandwidth communication. So I don't want to use only words. But that's not because I'm a baboon. That's because I want richer ways to communicate. If I spend 10 minutes at a whiteboard with a fellow engineer, I'm usually circling things, I'm drawing arrows over here, this is the important part, I'm hitting it a few times, I'm communicating with diagrams. But these aren't diagrams like software architecture diagrams. This is diagrams that is for communication. Anybody who has done this before knows what I'm talking about, right? So where's the 10 minutes at a whiteboard interface with the agents? Where is that? And what does that look like even? Is that just us in a tablet talking to the agent saying, circling something and saying, this part is important, right? We want to be able to help the agents understand our intent and then drive them towards the outcome that we want. So when you have only text, this is not quite possible. The next thing that we need are richer UI elements. Right now, if it's text in and then text out, I give text or I give maybe some voice sometimes, but anybody who has been in an open office setting and tried to only talk to their machine with voice knows that not the best UX. But I need to get back something that is more than just text. A lot of times, you're starting to see this, that we're getting back carousels, we're getting back embedded tweets, or we're getting back data visualizations, photos, all of that. And I think there's a great project that's trying to move this forward with the language GUI. And you get ways like maybe there's a snippet of a podcast that you can listen to. Maybe there is some kind of a carousel that you can scroll through and choose directly with these native ways that we like to interact with machines by clicking and swiping. It's a step in the right direction. But what we do not have when we have this, and what I think people are missing, is the steering capabilities of agents. What we can't do, and imagine a very complex multi-agent system, you can't say, hey, little Johnny over there, you gotta go this way a little bit more. We can't steer the agents. Or what are we gonna do? We're gonna go back to the prompt and say, like, maybe it was this word, I gotta explain myself, it was too fuzzy, right? And again, that's putting a lot of friction on the user. The user's not going to try once, try twice, fail, try 3 times, fail, and then really have the patience to stick it out and see, is this agent system gonna work? We don't have the agentic steering capabilities that you would want on a very detailed level. So, what are some potential ways that we can have these amazing steering capabilities and better UIs and UXs? Well, I like to take inspiration from other areas of UX. And here you can see anybody that plays music, this shouldn't be that. We got one over there, he was excited. I play music, yes I do. Were you on the dueling pianos last night? I can't see, was that you? No. So anybody that plays music will know this is very common, right? You have track views. Potentially there's a world where we have track views for the agentic workloads and when they're sprawling out, and then we can, on a granular level, tweak things. Look at, we've got different ways that we can add effects to one track or to the global track. So how do we tweak the agentic capabilities for just one part? Or we say, you know what? You, agent, you're a little too ambitious. Let's just stop right there. And then you can come back to it when we get a little more details, right? We want to be able to steer and have that capability in a very, very detailed way, because just interacting with text is not getting us there. It's too cumbersome for the user. Or maybe Some other folks in here, this is where the folks that are in the videographers and photographers bucket, you get to go, oh yeah, that looks familiar. This is a histogram. This is another way that we interact with very rich data. And so you might want to be able to say, hey, let's crush the shadows. Let's bring out the highlights. How would this look with agentic capabilities? Well, let's crush the risk tolerance and drive up the ambition. I'm sure everyone in this room loves what I'm saying right now with that. Let's just have all these agents that are low risk tolerance and high ambition running around the internet, right? Sounds like a recipe for disaster. But what we're thinking about is like, how can we fine-tune these agents in ways that might be more useful for us? But still, we're in the early innings. What I feel like we're in right now is this. We're in T9 Word, right? We're sitting there and typing with one hand and like, oh, I want to say something so bad, but just call you, right? And so we want something to get done, and then we go, I'll just do it myself. We haven't hit the touchscreen era. We're like a few iterations away from touchscreen. Actually, we haven't even hit the BlackBerry era. We're still like, that's next, right? So what are some potential futures that this could look like? Well, I feel like we would want to have agents that see what we see, and they can understand our context, so we don't have to always be in there explaining everything. They can get that rich context, and it's not chat as a first-class citizen. That's the thing here. The chat interface should be secondary, and I want to implore you to think about, if you had to build agentic interactions, how would you do it without chat? What would that look like? Maybe chat is there if you want to like escape hatch out to it, but what would it look like if you were not using chat first? That's the first piece. And then there's also another idea, like, do we want ambient agents? Do we want them to be proactive and they guide us to the next best action? So something that could happen is it's like, hey, you're at JFrog. I see that your calendar is free for the next 4 hours. Do you want me to rent you a suit for the gala? That would have been nice. Do you want me to tell you about some vineyards that are cool around here and what the top-rated things are? Or do you want me to go ahead and download the app for you and connect with some people that I think you might like? All of those things would pop up on the screen. Not this ask me anything. Ask me anything, I'm sitting there, I'm going, what is anything? What do I even want right now, right? I don't know. So I challenge you really to think beyond chat. Think about how this would look. And there's some ideas, the whiteboarding, the histograms, voice. Maybe it's all of it. Maybe it's just some of it. How would that look? If we've established one thing so far, it is that chat kind of sucks. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's not the future we were promised, right? We were promised to be drinking pina coladas on a beach, giving our intent. Agents are doing it all for us, right? So that's the first pillar of this talk. The second pillar is one that is a little bit more core to the business. And I think it is important to bring up because it's almost like there's a battle right now going on for the gateway of the internet. And this leads to a worse user experience. And what do I mean? Nobody wants to be a tool. Everybody wants to be an agent. How does this play out? Well, actually, why is this dangerous in the first place? Because we as users suffer. Let's think about it for a moment. Don't worry, I'll put it back up. I put it back up like 5 times because that's like the mantra of the second half of this talk, all right? So if we think about it, everyone wants to be the gateway to the internet. If our now utopian idea is this agentic capability that can go off and do things, and that's how we intersect with machines, well, what is it going to look like? Is it going to be some local agent that goes and pings out to the internet? Is it going to be me having to go to ChatGPT or Gemini? And then I got to do it from there, and they go and they use the tools? Is it all going to happen there? What's that actually going to look like? But before we even get there, is that really going to happen? Because that would be the best user experience, right? If we just had to interact with one agent that does things. But right now, what we've got ourselves into is a bit of a pickle. We've got ourselves into many verticalized agents because nobody wants to be a tool. And so you've got ChatGPT, it can do some things, and it can say, all right, yeah, great. I have this access to this tool. I can go browse the web, blah, blah, blah. And then you go over and HubSpot also has an agent that you can go and give context to, and boom. And then you go over to another agent, and it's like, yeah, this is mediocrely helpful. I don't know if the chat experience is really necessary for this agent, and does it need to be siloed? I don't know. So what I'm saying is there's a battle happening for how we are going to interface with software in general. And so I know that somebody is thinking this. I know it. I'm sure all of you that are there, you're like, yeah, but wait, doesn't MCP do this? Technically, on a technical level, yes. But here's what I'm going to argue. It's not about the technical piece right now. Why is that? Well, let me remind you, MCP makes you a tool. Nobody wants to be a tool. Everybody wants to own the relationship with the customer, right? You don't want to be a tool, you want to be an agent. And so, what does that give us? That gives us an experience that is slightly better software 2.0. That's slightly better. I want to tell you a story about when I was traveling to Portugal last month. I went, and the flight was delayed. And so I'm talking to my LLM of choice, and I'm saying, hey, it's delayed by 2 hours. Can I get any money back? I want to know, is it a claim? I was in Europe, so they have those kind of rules. And the LLM's there, and it's telling me, we go back and forth a bit, and eventually it says, yeah, you know what? You can file a complaint. Make sure to document everything. Make sure to do all these things so that you can get your money back. And I'm like, all right, sweet. So what's my next thing that I'm going to ask it? Somebody said, how do I do that? No. Go do it. Why would I not ask that? Why is that not an option? And then it says, no, I can't file the claim directly for you. I'm an AI assistant. Well, you're not assisting me much, are you? What am I supposed to do? So now what's the UX? My UX is, I've got to go ping over to one of these other sites, and I've got to either deal with their agent and re-explain the context, or I've got to fill out these cumbersome forms. And that's the magical experience we think is AI going to unlock. So why isn't it like that? Well, let me remind you, that's why you do not have this magical experience of Gemini saying, all right, cool, I'm going to just go use the flight claim tool, right? But if you really think about it, what we've got is who's controlling access to the user and to the machines. It's like we've got the browser wars happening all over again. Do you think Amazon is going to be okay with the research labs owning the relationship with the customer? Some of you might even work for Amazon, so you can tell me. But what is going to happen now? These agents are going to choose what tools they want. How are they going to decide what tools they use? Does the agent care if it's Joe Schmo tool or if it's Amazon? Why would it, right? Unless you're doing some agentic marketing. You're marketing to the agents, which, now that I said that, was not the best thing. It sounded ridiculous when it came out of my mouth, I know. So we'll just scratch that. Pretend like you never heard it. So we have to think about, even if these things are working like proper, are we okay being a tool? And if we are a tool, are we okay giving the relationship of our customer over to someone else? Right now, it's interesting because it feels like we're at a crossroads. And what's best for the user experience is not necessarily best for the companies. But let's assume this all gets taken care of. Amazon says, hey, ChatGPT, I'm going to pay you a couple billion to be the marketplace of choice, and then Gemini makes some partnerships, and you have all those deals happening. And in this fantasy world, it's all good. We just sweep that under the rug. We assume that that gets figured out, right? There's still a few blockers to us having this master agent world where I plug in and it goes and uses tools across the internet. And this is where I feel like for you all in this room, this might be the most important slide of the day. So now, if you were sleeping, wake up, all right? This is why, basically, I don't know about you, but I have trust issues, yeah? I'm surprised I did not see anybody wearing a shirt that said that I have trust issues. That would be a great shirt to have at a conference like this. But all of you working in the DevSecOps field, right? These are things where you can incrementally move the needle on. These are things that are important gaps that I've identified to keep us from having this utopian world. And so, if you look at all of this, every single one of these points makes me nervous. You're gonna tell me that context, my context, is just floating around the internet, being used by agents all across, and how do we know what's sensitive, what's not? How do we, there's no protocol to say like, oh, that's PII, or that's my sensitive stuff, right? And it doesn't even have to be PII, it can just be something that I personally don't want other tools using in my context, because I imagine all of you have said some stuff to your ChatGPT or Gemini that you probably wouldn't want there out on the internet, right? So that context, we have to make sure that that is locked down and that that's safe. If you think, actually, right now what's happening, which is wild, bit of a tangent, but it's wild, in the memory sphere, you see that there's like memory contamination that's happening. So the agents stop understanding, oh, this is Demetrios' agentic instance, and maybe this is Shlomi's agentic instance, and then they cross-contaminate, and the agent's like, oh yeah, that thing that you asked me yesterday. It's like, no, I didn't ask you anything yesterday. So we don't have multi-tenancy right now for agents. The cross-contamination is real, especially when it comes to memory, and you're trying to get that to execute reliably. Now, the other piece is authentication, right? I want these agents to be able to do things on my behalf, like me, but I don't want to give it God mode. I don't want to give it a bot token. That's not going to work. So how do we scope the permissions properly? Because sometimes I do want to give the agent the capability of buying some high heels off of Amazon for my wife. But sometimes I don't. I don't want it to buy 50 of them, right? So how do I real time give permissions, revoke permissions? How does that work? Because it's not just like auth 0, OAuth. It's not that. It's not like I auth into it once and then I'm good. We need to be able to scope the permissions properly. And we need to be able to constantly be giving and getting back, right? So there's authentication issues that are happening right now. And then we want to know, is it going to do things reliably? Is it going to actually do what I asked it to do? Is it going to do it properly, right? Like, does it do it 50 times or does it do it once? And how can I trust that it takes action in the right action? So, again, I said I've got trust issues. There's more on my slide that I wanted to read off, but I can't see it now because I've also got eyesight issues and I can't see. Can you guys scroll down a little bit? There, thank you. So basically, here we go. With my trust issues, I want to be able to trust that the agent, I want to be able to trust the agent with my data, which is not a new thing, right? Data's been flying around the internet for ages. And so how do we just add some new layers to that? I want to be able to trust that the agent has the right permissions and we can simultaneously give and revoke. And then I want to be able to trust that the agent can take the right action. And let me remind you of something. This is just me and my problems with the agent. I didn't talk about nefarious actors at all. And as we heard yesterday in the talk, that the nefarious folks, they're focusing on the new while we're stuck in the old, right? This is 100% just a wild card of throwing an LLM into the mix. My friend Sam likes to say, what is the most dangerous part of a car? It's the human. What is the most dangerous part of an agent? It's the LLM. So you gotta be able to know that what you ask that agent to do, it is properly scoped to do. Because if you give it God mode, it'll take advantage of it, right? Lastly, because I see we have a few more minutes on the clock that I did not add a slide to, but I will talk about for just a second, is payments. I didn't mention anything about payments. And how is the experience of payments gonna work? Is it that I have to pay per user? Do I have to pay per usage? Do I have to pay per outcome? Each one of these has its own downfalls. If I'm paying per user, then you get into a cursor situation where you're getting drained of cash because you have the power users that are just doing so much more than you're charging them. Or if it's per usage, you're probably sitting there and you're thinking, I don't need to use that agent because it's going to be expensive. I'll just do it myself, right? And then you're not trying to get the users to create that habit. And if you do it per outcome, you better be damn sure that your agent is going to get that outcome, because otherwise you're eating the cost of all those LLM calls when you don't get it back when you have a successful outcome. And then on the other side of the payments, you can go and you can walk around, basically throw a rock in San Francisco, and you'll find somebody that's working on agentic payments. It's amazing. It's cool that there's a lot of stuff happening in this field, but how are we gonna have all these sub-agents interacting with one another and paying each other? Because remember that idea that I had at the beginning? Go find me 100 leads, you have $1,000 budget. How are these agents going to interact with different agents? Or how are they going to tap into the different tools that they need and pay them when they need to, right? So you're thinking about micropayments, and it's all just like, oh, the agent needs a half a second of GPU. That doesn't exist right now. Half a second of GPU. Talk about scalability, right? You want some elasticity on that. So that's about it. I think that we've got a potential future that I would love to inspire you all to go back and hopefully start these conversations in your teams, at your workplaces, because this is where you can affect change, right? What are we looking for? What's a potential future? Is it a verifiable agentic marketplace? You may have seen MCP came out with something like the marketplace yesterday, I think. But there's no SOC 2 for agents. There's no way that I know I can trust this MCP or not. And I have heard rumblings of some company that's working on that. So then we might be able to think, well, if we want this user experience, can we drop in to being able to use any agent and then share that context across the web? Can we drop in and it knows? Is that too euphoric? Is that too utopian, right? One thing, actually two things that I know is we definitely want to figure out how we're safely transporting this data across the internet, and how we make sure that my data feels safe and I no longer have those trust issues. And then when the agents take action, how can we make sure that we have minimum viable permissions, right? So I'll finish my talk with one of my favorite jokes that I think a lot of you in this room will find funny. What does the S in vibe coding stand for? Security, of course. There we go. My name's Demetrios. This has been awesome. Thank you all for this. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can scan that bad boy, or you can just send me an email. I love talking about this stuff all the time. Thanks.